Ethan Cross was overjoyed when a mysterious system gave him $100 million. There was only one condition. If his factory lost money, every dollar of the loss would become his personal fortune. Ethan immediately doubled employee salaries, bought outrageously expensive equipment, and hired hundreds of workers nobody else wanted. He expected bankruptcy. Instead, the factory's profits exploded. As Ethan stared at another record-breaking financial report, he nearly coughed up blood. Because the harder he tried to destroy the company, the richer the company became. And his dream of becoming rich was getting farther away every day. What kind of cursed system rewards failure with wealth, but punishes success with billions? Chapter 1. The Art of Failing Successfully. The ledger on Ethan Cross's desk was bleeding red, and not the fashionable kind. "Mr. Cross, the representatives from Union Bank are in the lobby," his secretary, Clara, said through the intercom. Her voice trembled slightly. She was 58, had worked for the Cross textile factory since Ethan's grandfather ran the place, and currently looked like she was preparing for an execution. "Tell them I'll be right out, Clara," Ethan sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. He looked out the grime-crusted window of his second-story office. Below, the factory floor was a ghost town. Only 3 of the 12 loom machines were running, clacking away with a rhythmic, dying wheeze. The air, once thick with the proud, sweet scent of raw cotton and industrial oil, just smelled like dust and defeat. 30 years old, and he was about to be the Cross who put the final nail in the family coffin. His grandfather built it. His father expanded it. Ethan was going to bury it. They owed $1.4 million to suppliers, $800,000 to the bank, and the electricity bill alone looked like a phone number. Bankruptcy wasn't just inevitable. It was a mercy killing. Ethan stood up, straightened his cheap tie, and prepared to face the music. But as his hand touched the doorknob, the world abruptly stopped. The frantic ticking of the wall clock froze. The distant hum of the 3 operating looms vanished into absolute silence. Before Ethan could even gasp, a crisp, neon-blue holographic screen materialized directly in front of his face. System initialization complete. Scanning host identity. Ethan Cross. Status: owner of Cross Textiles. Current value -$2.2 million. Target match confirmed. Congratulations, host. You have been selected by the wealth transfer system. Ethan blinked. He rubbed his eyes. I'm finally having a stress-induced psychotic break. The wealth transfer system is entirely real, host. Please read the following operational guidelines carefully. First, the system will provide a proprietary corporate fund for the host to invest into Cross Textiles. Second, the host cannot directly embezzle, steal, or transfer these funds to a personal account. Third, any profits generated by the company belong strictly to the company and cannot be withdrawn by the host. Fourth, however, any genuine financial losses incurred by the company will be converted into the host's personal wealth at a 1-to-1 ratio during the settlement period. Ethan's breath hitched. He read the last line again. Any genuine financial losses will be converted into personal wealth. Wait, Ethan whispered, his voice cracking in the dense silence. If the company loses $1 million, I get $1 million in my personal bank account? Correct. Example: lose $10 million, earn $10 million in personal wealth. The system funds will refresh after each settlement period. Do you accept the binding? A hysterical laugh bubbled up in Ethan's throat. Accept it? Was the sky blue? Was his factory a burning dumpster fire? For the past 3 years, he had bled, cried, and skipped meals, trying to make this stubborn factory profitable, and the market had brutally kicked him in the teeth at every turn. Making money in the textile industry was practically impossible. But losing money? Oh God, losing money was his specialty. Bind it. Bind it right now, Ethan shouted. System successfully bound. Initial corporate fund granted, $500,000. First settlement period, 30 days. Current personal wealth, 0. Note: all expenses must conform to reasonable business logic. You cannot buy a $1 million golden toilet for the office. Go forth and manage your business, host. The blue screen dissolved into light, and the world violently snapped back to life. The clock ticked. The distant looms wheezed. Ethan stood by the door, a wild, maniacal grin spreading across his face. $500,000. He just needed to blow through $500,000 in 30 days. Let the factory collapse under its own weight, and he would walk away a $500,000. It was foolproof. He threw open his office door and marched down to the lobby. Two men in sharp, predatory gray suits were waiting. The lead banker, a man named Henderson, looked at Ethan with a patronizing, pitying smile. "Ah, Mr. Cross, I assume you've reviewed the liquidation paperwork we sent over? If you sign today, we can make the foreclosure process relatively painless." "I'm not signing," Ethan interrupted cheerfully, wiping the smug look right off Henderson's face. "Mr. Cross, let's be realistic," Henderson said, his voice dropping to a stern, condescending edge. "Your factory is dead. You can't even afford this month's interest payment. If you don't liquidate, we will take legal action." "How much do I owe you to keep you off my back for the next month?" Ethan asked, leaning against the reception desk. "The immediate overdue interest and penalties total $150,000. But even if you magically find that, you still have to pay your workers, your suppliers." Ding. Ethan's phone vibrated in his pocket. He pulled it out and saw a bank notification. His corporate account, which had held exactly $4.12 this morning, now read $500,004.12. "Give me your card," Ethan said. Henderson frowned, reaching into his breast pocket and handing over a business card with the bank's routing info. Ethan opened his mobile banking app, typed in the numbers, and authorized a transfer of $150,000. "Check your system." Henderson's phone buzzed almost instantly. He pulled it out, scoffed, and then his eyes widened to the size of dinner plates. He stared at the screen, then at Ethan, then back at the screen. This is a wire transfer from your corporate account," Henderson stammered, his legal arrogance completely evaporating. "Where did you get—" "Don't worry about where it came from. The interest is paid. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a company to run. Get out of my lobby," Ethan said, waving them off like pesky flies. The two bankers practically stumbled over themselves as they rushed out the front door. Clara, who had been watching from behind the desk with her hands over her mouth, looked at Ethan like he had just turned water into wine. "Mr. Cross, Ethan, how did you do that? Are we saved?" "Saved? Clara, we're just getting started," Ethan laughed, a manic glint in his eye. "Gather the entire staff on the factory floor. I'm making an announcement in 10 minutes. 10 minutes later, Ethan stood on a wooden pallet in the center of the warehouse. Gathered before him were the remaining 42 employees of Cross Textiles. They were a ragtag group, graying men who had spent 30 years handling fabric, weary mothers working the packing lines, and young apprentices looking terrified of losing their first job. The atmosphere was heavy, thick with the dread of expected layoffs. Ethan looked at them and felt a sudden, profound surge of excitement. To burn through the remaining $350,000 of the system's money, he needed a massive, unavoidable drain on resources. He needed an expense so absurd that the accounting software would literally cry. And the system rules said it had to follow reasonable business logic. Well, taking care of your workforce was technically business logic. Ethan cleared his throat. "Everyone listen up. I know rumors have been circulating. I know you're worried about the factory closing." Several workers lowered their heads. One old weaver, Leo, tightly gripped his lunchbox. "But I am here to tell you that Cross Textiles is pivoting," Ethan announced loudly. "And our first priority is investing in our greatest asset, you." The workers blinked, confused. "Effective immediately," Ethan roared, raising a finger. "Everyone's salary is doubled." Silence. Absolute dead silence. The workers exchanged bewildered glances. Leo looked up, squinting. "Mr. Cross, did you say doubled? Is this a joke before you fire us?" "No joke. Doubled. Backdated to the 1st of this month." Ethan smiled warmly, internally cheering. Yes, 42 people getting double pay? That's an extra $80,000 down the drain this month alone. Glorious. But he wasn't done. If he wanted to guarantee a massive loss, he had to push it further. "Furthermore," Ethan continued, his voice echoing off the corrugated iron walls, "we are shifting to a 4-day work week. 32 hours a week, but you will be paid for 40. And medical benefits? The company will now cover 100% of your premiums." The silence grew heavier, so thick you could drop a pin. Clara, standing at the edge of the crowd, looked like she was about to faint. "Mr. Cross, we can't afford that. The accounting department will predict total collapse within 3 weeks. Exactly. That's exactly what I want, Ethan thought, desperately suppressing a grin. Clara, have faith. The accounting department doesn't see the vision, Ethan shouted back. He turned back to the stunned workers. You have all given your lives to this factory. It's time the factory gave back to you. Now take the rest of the day off with full pay. Go home to your families. For a long 3 seconds, nobody moved. They looked at Ethan as if he had lost his mind. Then, it started with a single clap from Leo. Then another. Within moments, the entire factory floor erupted into a deafening roar of cheers, shouts, and tears. An older woman on the packing line covered her face and began to sob openly, now able to afford her husband's medication. Men were hugging each other. Ethan stepped down from the pallet, feeling like a genius. By shrinking their work hours by 20% and doubling their pay, productivity would mathematically crater. Orders would be delayed, penalties would accumulate, and the remaining $350,000 would vanish into thin air. 30 days from now, Cross Textiles would be completely broke, and Ethan Cross would be a very, very rich man. As he walked back to his office, humming a cheerful tune, he glanced up at the ceiling. How hard can it be to lose money? Chapter 2. The Curse of High Productivity. The following Monday morning, Ethan walked into the factory at 9 a.m., holding a warm cup of coffee and humming a jaunty tune. He slept like a baby over the weekend. For the first time in 3 years, the crushing weight of impending bankruptcy didn't make his chest tight. He was practically counting down the days. 27 days left in the settlement period. He expected to walk into a quiet, sluggish environment. After all, he had slashed their work week to 4 days and doubled their pay. Naturally, human psychology would dictate that they take it easy, coast along, and enjoy the free ride. Delayed orders meant missing client deadlines, which meant contractual penalties and lost customers. Ethan smiled. Ah, the sweet smell of financial ruin. But the moment he opened the double doors to the production floor, the sheer wall of sound hit him. Clack, clack, clack. The old looms weren't just wheezing, they were roaring. The entire floor was a blur of motion. Every single one of the 12 machines was running at maximum capacity. What in the... Ethan muttered, his coffee almost slipping from his hand. Mr. Cross, good morning, Leo, the veteran weaver, shouted over the din. He was drenched in sweat, his shirt sleeves rolled up, but his eyes were bright with an intensity Ethan had never seen before. He wasn't just working, he was attacking the fabric. Leo, why are all the machines running? Ethan asked, staring at the frantic activity. I thought 9 of these were broken down or too expensive to run due to power consumption. They were, Leo grinned, wiping his brow with a greasy rag. But over the weekend, Marcus from maintenance and a few of the boys came in on their own time. They said if a boss is willing to double our pay and cover our family's health care, the least we can do is make sure his machines actually work. Marcus used spare parts from the scrapyard to jerry-rig the gearboxes. Look at them go. Ethan stood frozen. No, no, no. This is wrong. You're supposed to be lazy. You're supposed to exploit my generosity. He frantically looked around the floor. It got worse. Usually the packing line had a defect rate of about 8%. The workers were usually tired, bored, and let flawed stitching slip through. But today, 3 workers were rigorously inspecting every single yard of denim with magnifying glasses. They were fixing mistakes before the fabric even reached the final roll. "Mr. Cross," Clara called out, running down the metal stairs from the office balcony. She was holding a stack of papers, her face flushed with excitement. Ethan swallowed hard. "Clara, tell me bad news. Please, tell me the electricity bill is going to bankrupt us." "The electricity bill is up by 30%, Clara said. Ethan's heart soared. "Yes, but our output is up by 300%, Clara shouted triumphantly, waving the papers. "And because the quality is suddenly flawless, the defect rate has dropped to 0. 0, Ethan. I've never seen anything like it in my 30 years here." Ethan felt a cold sweat break out on his neck. 300%? But we don't even have clients to buy that much inventory. It'll just sit in the warehouse and rot. We'll lose money on storage. "That's the best part," Clara beamed, pulling out a specific invoice. "Word travels fast in the garment district. Vincent Vance, the regional distributor for 3 major clothing brands, heard about our sudden surge in quality. He dropped by an hour ago while you were out. He inspected the new batches, called them premium-grade artisanal denim, and bought our entire surplus up front. He even signed a 3-month exclusive contract." Ethan felt the room spin. He grabbed the railing of the stairs to steady himself. He'd bought it all? Up front? How much? $240,000, Clara whispered, tears of joy welling in her eyes. "The deposit just cleared in our corporate account. Ethan, you're a genius. By doubling their pay, you eliminated their financial stress, which completely revitalized their morale. The business textbooks were wrong. You cracked the code." Ding. Ethan's phone vibrated. With a trembling hand, he pulled it out. "Corporate fund balance, $590,004.12. Current settlement wealth, 0. Warning, company is currently on track for a net profit of $140,000 by the end of the 30-day period. Projected personal wealth settlement, 0. Ethan stared at the screen. He had started the day with $350,000 left to burn. Now, thanks to his workers' terrifying demonic work ethic, the company had actually made money. He was further away from his fortune than when he started. He looked at the floor. The workers were looking up at him, their faces full of absolute reverence, admiration, and loyalty. They thought he was a visionary savior. In reality, Ethan wanted to vomit blood. "You guys are killing me," Ethan thought, looking at Leo, who was currently operating 2 machines at once like a textile weaving wizard. "I tried to ruin your lives with a 4-day work week, and you reward me with premium-grade denim?" Ethan stumbled back up the stairs and locked himself in his office. He collapsed into his chair, staring at the ceiling. "Okay," Ethan muttered to himself, slapping his own cheeks to snap out of the panic. "Calm down. It's just a minor setback. I made a mistake. I underestimated the power of human gratitude. Lesson learned." He sat up and leaned over his desk, grabbing a pen and a fresh notepad. If treating them well made them work harder, then he just needed to pivot to a different strategy. He had to spend the money on something that was a guaranteed, undeniable financial black hole. Something that no amount of hard work or loyalty could fix. Ethan's eyes narrowed as he looked out the window at the old, rusty delivery trucks parked in the alley. "Machines," Ethan whispered, a slow, desperate grin returning to his face. "I need to buy expensive, overly complicated, highly specialized foreign machinery. The kind that requires imported parts, constant maintenance, and takes months to calibrate." He opened his laptop and began searching for the most absurdly overpriced, impractical textile equipment on the European market. Let's see you guys high productivity your way out of a German customs delay. Chapter 3. Suffering from Success. German engineering, Ethan murmured, his eyes reflecting the harsh glow of his laptop screen. The beautiful, expensive, financially ruinous pinnacle of industrial arrogance. He had spent the entire night scouring international machinery catalogs. To the untrained eye, the Titan X9 fabric loom was a marvel of modern engineering. It boasted computer-guided precision, automated fiber blending, and a sleek, soundproof titanium chassis. To Ethan, it was a beautiful, shiny $250,000 black hole. The manufacturer's fine print explicitly stated that the Titan X9 required proprietary German software updates, specialized synthetic lubricants that cost $400 a gallon, and 3 Phase 4 electrical transformers just to turn on. Most importantly, it was designed for ultra-fine Egyptian cotton, not the rugged, heavy-duty denim Ethan's factory produced. If he forced his workers to use it, the thick denim fibers would inevitably jam the delicate sensors, grinding production to a screeching halt. The warranty would be voided. The repair technicians would have to be flown in from Munich on the company's dime, and the factory would be paralyzed. It was a masterstroke of sabotage. Ethan slammed his laptop shut, dialed the international sales number, and wired the remaining $250,000 of his system funds before his conscience could kick in. 2 weeks later, a massive flatbed truck backed into the factory alley. The workers gathered around as a pristine monolithic machine wrapped in protective plastic was hoisted into the warehouse. It looked like a spaceship parked next to a row of rusty bicycles. "What is that, Mr. Cross?" Marcus, the head of maintenance, asked. He was scratching his bald head, staring at the digital control panel with a mix of awe and deep intimidation. "It looks complicated." "This, Marcus, is the future of Cross Textiles," Ethan said, puffing out his chest with a look of supreme confidence. "The Titan X9. It cost $250,000. Clara, standing nearby with her clipboard, gasped. "Ethan, that's practically all the surplus cash we had left from the Vance order. If this machine doesn't produce immediately, we won't be able to cover the next payroll." "Exactly," Ethan blurted out, a bit too quickly. He coughed to cover his tracks. "I mean high risk, high reward, Clara. We must innovate or die." Ethan turned back to Marcus, putting a heavy, encouraging hand on the mechanic's shoulder. "Marcus, I want you and your team to completely halt production on the old, reliable looms. I want everyone focusing entirely on mastering this German beauty. Load our heaviest, roughest raw denim thread into it right away." Marcus looked worried. "But Mr. Cross, the manual is entirely in German, and these tension sensors look incredibly delicate. If we feed heavy denim into an ultra-fine loom without calibrating the pneumatic pressure—" "I have utmost faith in you, Marcus," Ethan interrupted, flashing a bright, wicked smile. "No pressure. Take your time. If it breaks, it breaks." With that, Ethan spun on his heel and practically floated back up to his office. He poured himself a glass of water, sat back in his leather chair, and waited for the glorious sound of grinding metal. He waited for an hour, then 2 hours. By the 3rd hour, the factory floor was suspiciously quiet. Ethan peeked through his blinds. Marcus and 3 other workers were huddled around the machine, surrounded by tools, thick manuals, and translation apps on their phones. The machine wasn't running. Ethan smiled, taking a slow sip of his water. Perfect. Total stagnation. At 4:00 p.m., Ethan decided to go down and offer some consolation to his struggling team, fully preparing to act devastated by the setback. But as his hand touched the door, a sudden, rhythmic, terrifyingly smooth sound echoed from the warehouse floor. It wasn't the violent clack-clack of the old looms. It was a deep, futuristic, predatory purr. Whir thwip, whir thwip. Ethan's heart dropped into his shoes. He sprinted down the stairs. The workers weren't panicking. They were cheering. Marcus was standing at the control panel, his hands covered in grease, a wild, triumphant laugh escaping his chest. And feeding out of the back of the Titan X9 was a bolt of fabric, so incredibly smooth, so perfectly woven, that it practically shimmered under the dim factory lights. "What did you do?" Ethan screamed over the hum, rushing up to the machine. "Why is it running? It's supposed to jam." Marcus wiped his face, leaving a streak of black grease across his forehead. "Mr. Cross, you are an absolute genius, a visionary." "I am?" Ethan cried out, his voice cracking. "Yes, when you told us to put the heavy denim into it, I thought you were crazy. But then I realized what you were trying to teach us. You wanted us to push the machine past its limits, to discover its true potential." "No, I didn't." "You did, sir. Don't be modest," Marcus shouted back gratefully. "We couldn't read the manual, but young Toby here realized the pneumatic pressure system was identical to the turbocharged engine of an old Volkswagen Golf. We bypassed the delicate German software restrictors, manually cranked the air intake by 40%, and used a blend of industrial mineral oil to lubricate the feeders." Marcus proudly pointed to the moving fabric. "Look at it. Because the Titan X9 has computer-guided microneedles, forcing the heavy denim thread through it didn't break the machine. It compressed the denim into a high-density, ultra-durable luxury weave. It's completely windproof, water-resistant, but as soft as silk on the inside." Ethan stared at the fabric. He touched it. It felt amazing. It felt like a pair of jeans that would cost $800 in a boutique store in Manhattan. "Mr. Cross," Clara's voice pierced through his despair. She was running toward him, waving her phone in the air, her face completely pale. "Let me guess," Ethan said, his voice entirely hollow. "More bad news?" "Unbelievable news," Clara choked out, gripping Ethan's arm. "A representative from Ethelgard, the European luxury heritage brand, was in the city inspecting local mills. They heard we bought a Titan X9, which is rare for a small factory, and they came by for a surprise inspection while you were in your office. They saw the high-density denim Marcus just fabricated." Ethan blinked slowly. "And?" "They just offered us a contract to supply the raw fabric for their upcoming autumn outerwear line. They are paying an upfront retainer of $450,000, with a guaranteed order of $2 million over the next 6 months. Clara began to jump up and down. "We're rich, Ethan. The factory is saved. Your gamble paid off." Ding. Ethan's hand was shaking so badly he could barely hold his phone as the system notification flared to life in plain text. "Corporate fund balance, $790,004.12. Current settlement wealth, $0. Warning. Host's actions have inadvertently elevated Cross Textiles to a Tier 2 premium supplier. Projected net profit by the end of the 30-day period, $390,000. Projected personal wealth settlement, $0. Ethan stared at the screen, then at the shimmering luxury denim, and finally at his workers, who were currently hoisting Marcus onto their shoulders like a hero. Ethan slowly lowered his head onto the cold, sleek titanium chassis of the $250,000 German machine. A single tear rolled down his cheek. "I just wanted to be rich," Ethan whispered to the machine. Chapter 4. The Incompetence Recruitment Drive. 10 days left until the final settlement. Ethan sat in his office, staring at his banking app with a hollow, dead-eyed expression. Thanks to the massive upfront deposit from Ethelgard, the luxury heritage brand, Cross Textiles was practically drowning in liquidity. He had tried to spend money. He really had. He bought the most expensive, specialized synthetic oil for the German machine, ordered premium breakroom snacks, and even upgraded the factory's internet to an enterprise-grade fiber-optic network that cost thousands a month. But the factory just kept hummed along smoothly, churning out luxury denim like an unstoppable profit-generating monster. "If I can't break the machines, and I can't overpay the current staff anymore without triggering a system audit, then I need to break the human element." The corporate fund balance was sitting at roughly $750,000. He needed a massive bleeding wound on his balance sheet, a drain so severe that no amount of premium denim sales could plug the leak. He needed to hire people, a lot of people, but not just any workers. He needed the most useless, inexperienced, unproductive workforce the city had to offer. If you flooded the factory floor with hundreds of people who didn't know a spool of yarn from a fire hydrant, efficiency would plunge. They would break the machines, ruin the raw materials, delay the Ethelgard order, and cost a fortune in training and salaries. Ethan's eyes lit up. Yes, a mass recruitment drive, but with a twist. He pulled up a blank document on his laptop and began typing out a job posting. Usually, companies asked for 5 years of experience, specialized certifications, and immaculate backgrounds. Ethan inverted every single standard corporate metric. No experience required, he wrote. In fact, candidates with extensive textile experience will be heavily penalized during the interview process. Gaps in employment? Welcome. Criminal records? We believe in second chances. Single parents needing extreme schedule flexibility? Absolutely encouraged. Placed at the front of the line. Older workers turned away by ageist tech companies. Please apply. Disabled veterans? We will modify the workstations just for you. To ensure it looked like reasonable business logic to the system, Ethan titled the campaign, "The Cross Textiles Corporate Social Responsibility and Community Integration Initiative." He set the starting salary for these completely untrained, unvetted positions at a staggering $28 an hour, nearly triple the local minimum wage. "Let's see the accounting department spin this one," Ethan laughed maniacally. "Hundreds of unskilled workers drawing massive salaries while destroying our production line. It's a guaranteed economic disaster." 2 days later, the line for the interview process stretched out the factory doors, down the block, and around the corner. Clara walked into Ethan's office, holding a stack of resumes that looked like a telephone book. Her hands were shaking. "Mr. Cross? Ethan, have you lost your mind? The local news stations are outside. They're calling this the most radical philanthropic hiring drive in the state's history." "It's not philanthropy, Clara. It's corporate restructuring," Ethan said, trying to look stoic. "Bring in the first batch." For the next 6 hours, Ethan personally conducted the easiest interviews in human history. A 24-year-old young man named Julian sat down, nervously shifting in his seat. "Mr. Cross, I have to be honest. I just got out of prison 3 months ago. Nobody will hire me. I don't know anything about textiles." "Are you clumsy?" Ethan asked, leaning forward with deep interest. I dropped a tray of dishes at a diner last week," Julian offered hesitantly. "Incredible. Hired. Starting Monday." Ethan slammed his hand on the desk, beaming. Next was Arthur, a 64-year-old man with thick glasses. "I spent 40 years as an auto mechanic, but my back gave out. I can't lift heavy engines anymore, and no factory wants an old guy who might slow down the line." "Can you weave denim?" Ethan asked. "Never touched a loom in my life, sir." "Perfect. You're the new assistant quality inspector. Hired." Next was Maria, a despaired-looking mother of 3. "I can only work between the hours of 9:30 a.m. and 2:30 p.m. because of school drop-offs, and I might have to leave abruptly if my youngest gets sick. I understand if that doesn't work for you." "It works perfectly. We will give you a fully flexible shift and pay you a full day's wage regardless," Ethan said, his heart singing with joy. "Yes, zero consistency on the production line. Total chaos." By the end of the week, Ethan had hired nearly 150 new employees. The factory floor was packed. The payroll had bloated to an astronomical figure. On Monday morning, Ethan stood on the observation balcony, looking down at the beautiful disaster he had created. The floor was a chaotic mess. People were bumping into each other. Julian was staring blankly at a digital interface, and Arthur was squinting at a spool of thread. Ethan took a deep breath, inhaling the sweet, oncoming scent of financial failure. "Go ahead," he whispered to the crowd below. "Destroy my company." 3 days later, Ethan was sitting in his office, waiting for the inevitable phone call from an angry Ethelgard representative complaining about ruined fabric. Instead, a loud commotion erupted from the factory floor. Ethan rushed down the stairs, expecting a riot or a broken machine. Instead, he found a massive crowd of new and old workers gathered around loom number 6. Arthur, the 64-year-old former mechanic, was holding a wrench, his hands covered in grease. Next to him was Julian, the ex-con, who was grinning from ear to ear. "What happened?" Ethan demanded, his heart hammering with a sudden horrible sense of dread. "Tell me it's permanently broken." "Far from it, Mr. Cross," Marcus, the head of maintenance, yelled, shoving his way through the crowd. He looked at Arthur like the man was a god. Old Arthur here noticed that the feeding gears on our secondary looms were slipping, which was causing the mire tension issues we've had for a decade. He used an old automotive trick, realigning the flywheel tensioners using scrap clutch plates from his garage. Arthur rubbed the back of his neck, blushing. "Well, sir, a loom isn't much different from a transmission. Once I saw the problem, Julian here helped me lift the housing and weld a custom stabilizer. It didn't just fix the slip, it actually increased the machine's maximum rotational speed by 20% without tearing the thread." Ethan felt the air leave his lungs. It goes faster now?" "Much faster," Marcus cheered. "But that's not even the best part." While Julian was cleaning out the storage basement to make room for the new hires' lockers, he found something. "Show him, Julian." Julian stepped forward holding a dusty binder and a stack of shipping receipts. "Mr. Cross, since I had a lot of time on my hands in my previous residence, I read a lot of books on logistics and accounting. I was looking through our old raw cotton supplier invoices from the last 2 years. I cross-referenced their weight certificates with our actual intake ledger." Julian's eyes turned sharp. "Our primary supplier has been shorting this factory by 5% on every single shipment for the last 24 months. They were using a ghost weight skimming scam. I already called our legal counsel. We have them dead to rights. They are legally obligated to refund us $380,000 in overcharges by tomorrow afternoon." The factory floor erupted into thunderous applause. Workers were cheering Julian's name. Maria, the single mother, was crying tears of joy, shouting about how grateful they all were to a boss who gave them a chance when the rest of the world spat on them. Ethan stood frozen in the center of the cheering crowd. His ears rang, his vision blurred. Ding! The system notification flashed before his eyes in merciless, plain text. Corporate fund balance, $1,130,004.12. Current settlement wealth, $0. Warning, host's recruitment initiative has unlocked the unconventional talent hidden modifier. Factory efficiency increased by 15%. Recovered fraudulent losses, $380,000. Projected net profit by settlement day, $650,000. Projected personal wealth settlement, $0. Ethan slowly turned around, dragged his feet up the metal stairs, and slumped into his office chair. He looked at the portrait of his grandfather on the wall. "Grandpa," Ethan whispered, his voice trembling as he stared at his overflowing bank account. "I'm trying to ruin your legacy. I am actively trying to be a terrible, selfish person. Why does the universe keep rewarding me?" Chapter 5, The Disaster Campaign. 5 days left until the settlement period closed. Ethan sat at his desk, staring out the window like a man awaiting a life sentence. Down in the courtyard, a group of off-duty workers were laughing, sharing a barbecue they had organized to celebrate the factory's new golden age. The corporate fund was a bloated, mocking monster, sitting at over $1.1 million. If the settlement happened right now, Ethan would walk away with exactly $0 in his personal bank account. He would remain a stressed-out factory owner, trapped in a prison of his own accidental success. "I need something bulletproof," Ethan muttered, his eyes bloodshot. "No more workers, no more machines. Every time I touch the internal operations, these terrifyingly grateful people turn my sabotage into a miracle." He had to look outward. He needed an external force that no amount of employee loyalty or mechanical genius could salvage. Marketing. Ethan snapped his fingers. It was brilliant. In the corporate world, companies threw hundreds of millions of dollars into terrible advertising campaigns that yielded absolutely nothing. If you made a product that nobody wanted to buy, or if you offended your entire customer base, your sales would drop to zero overnight. Ethan called an emergency meeting in the main conference room. Clara, Marcus, Julian, and a few of the senior floor managers sat down looking at Ethan with wide, expectant eyes. To them, Ethan was no longer just the boss. He was the oracle of textiles, a man whose every bizarre whim resulted in millions of dollars. "Team," Ethan said, slamming a thick folder onto the table. "Our high-density denim order for Ethelgard is running smoothly, too smoothly. We are sitting on too much cash, and as your leader, I believe we need to aggressively brand ourselves. I want to launch a massive, nationwide marketing campaign for our own independent clothing line." Clara's eyes lit up. "An independent line? Ethan, that's bold. We've always just been a supplier. What's the aesthetic?" Ethan leaned forward, a sinister glint in his eye. "We are going to call it the Imperfect Collection. It will feature denim jackets and jeans made entirely from our leftover, unwashed, raw industrial hemp and coarse flax blends. No dyeing, no softening treatments. The fabric will be stiff, scratchy, and smell faintly of organic soil." The managers blinked. Julian raised a hand. Mr. Cross, scratchy, unwashed hemp? It sounds incredibly uncomfortable to wear." "Exactly." Ethan slammed his hand on the table, barely resisting the urge to cackle. "It's anti-fashion. It's a statement against the soft, complacent modern world. And the price tag? We will sell these scratchy jackets for $400 each." Clara gasped. $400 for uncomfortable, undyed hemp? "Ethan, the market will laugh us out of existence. Nobody will buy that. We'll lose every cent we pour into the advertising." "Yes, yes, you beautiful secretary, that is the entire point." Ethan's heart soared. "We aren't aiming for the masses, Clara. We are aiming for artistic expression," Ethan countered smoothly. "And to make sure everyone hears about our anti-fashion statement, I am allocating $600,000 of our corporate funds to a massive, aggressive billboard and social media campaign. I want the ads to be deliberately baffling. Just a picture of a bleak, rain-drenched concrete wall with our logo and the words, 'Deal with it.' $600,000. Gone in a single stroke. Even if the system checked it, investing in a luxury fashion launch was a perfectly valid, high-risk business move." The room was completely silent. The managers looked at the sketches of the stiff, muddy brown jackets, then at the bizarre slogan. Finally, Julian let out a long breath. "A high-priced, brutally uncomfortable clothing line advertised through existential dread? Cross. This is either complete madness, or it's a terrifyingly deep critique of consumer culture." "It's madness, Julian. Trust me," Ethan said, smiling warmly. "Now authorize the funds. Let's launch this disaster." Over the next 3 days, $600,000 vanished from the corporate account as billboards went up in major cities and unskippable bleak video ads flooded social media. Ethan spent his time lounging in his office chair, scrolling through the internet, eagerly waiting for the inevitable wave of mockery, bad reviews, and zero sales. On the 4th day, just 24 hours before the settlement, Ethan woke up early and checked his phone, expecting to see a dead, stagnant corporate account. Instead, his phone was frozen. It was vibrating so violently from incoming notifications that the screen was a blur. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. A cold sweat broke out over his entire body. No, no, please, not again. He forcefully restarted the phone and opened his emails. There were over 10,000 unread messages, all from high-end fashion boutiques, hypebeast blogs, and online retailers. He frantically opened a popular social media app. The top trending topic nationwide was #DealWithIt. Ethan clicked on the trend with a trembling finger. The very first video was by a massive global fashion influencer with 50 million followers, a teenager known for wearing the most bizarre, avant-garde outfits. The influencer was standing in a mirror, wearing Ethan's stiff, scratchy, muddy brown industrial hemp jacket. "Yo guys, you need to check out this new drop from Cross Textiles," the influencer said, adjusting the stiff collar. "It's called the Imperfect Collection. It's literally so raw and uncomfortable that it forces you to feel alive. It rejects the fake soft corporate aesthetic of modern fashion. It smells like actual dirt. It's the ultimate quiet luxury eco-protest statement. 10 out of 10. Ethan's jaw hit the floor. He scrolled down to the comments. OMG, it's so dystopian, I need it. A jacket that forces you to suffer? Brutalism at its finest. Just ordered 2. Finally, a brand with the balls to make something unwearable. Absolute genius. Ethan dropped his phone onto his bed. He felt like his soul was leaving his body. He didn't even want to look at the system screen, but the universe was merciless. The plain text notification flared directly in front of his eyes. Ding. Corporate fund balance, $2,400,400.12. Current settlement wealth, 0. Warning. Host's marketing campaign inadvertently triggered an avant-garde hype viral phenomenon. The initial production run of the Imperfect collection sold out in 4 hours. Net profit generated $1.3 million. Settlement in 24 hours. Projected personal wealth settlement, 0. Ethan laid back down on his pillow, staring blankly at the ceiling, as the morning sun filtered through his blinds. Down the street, he could hear the distant happy cheers of a city proud to host the hottest new fashion empire in the country. I made a scratchy, overpriced jacket that smells like mud, Ethan whispered to the empty room, a tear slipping down his cheek. I tried to insult the customers. Why do they like it? Why won't anyone let me be poor? Chapter 6. The Ultimate Settlement Day. The countdown timer in Ethan's mind was ticking down its final, agonizing seconds. He sat at his desk, his eyes unfocused, staring at the plain text layout on his phone. The settlement hour had arrived. For 30 days, he had lied, sabotaged, overpaid, and aggressively tried to burn his family heritage to the ground. And the result? The factory was currently boasting a record-breaking corporate fund balance. The automated system message flashed in front of his eyes. Settlement period, 30 days. Time remaining, 000. Calculating final financial metrics for Cross Textiles. Initial corporate fund, $500,000. Current corporate fund balance, $2,430,112. Net profit incurred, $1,930,004.12. Net loss incurred, 0. Ethan closed his eyes, bracing for the inevitable punch to the gut. Settlement finalized, converting financial losses to host's personal wealth at a 1-to-1 ratio. Personal wealth awarded, 0. Current personal wealth, 0. Ethan let out a long, shuddering sigh. He didn't even have the energy to scream. $0. After 30 days of absolute stress, manic panics, and sleepless nights, his personal bank account remained a barren wasteland. Meanwhile, his corporate account was so bloated it could comfortably survive a 3-year economic depression. Mr. Cross, Ethan. The office door burst open. Clara stepped inside, her face flushed red, clutching a literal bottle of expensive champagne. Behind her stood Julian and Marcus, both grinning so wide, their faces looked like they were going to split in half. The final numbers just came in from the e-commerce platform, Clara cried, tears of pure ecstasy streaming down her wrinkled cheeks. The second batch of the Imperfect collection sold out in 90 seconds. The bank just called to ask if we need to open a private wealth management tier for our corporate checking account. We are a global phenomenon, boss, Marcus roared, wiping a speck of industrial oil from his cheek. The guys on the floor are chanting your name. They want to put up a bronze statue of you in the courtyard. A statue, Ethan repeated, flatly, his voice devoid of all life. Great, just what I always wanted, a bronze reminder of my own incompetence. Don't be so modest, Mr. Cross. Julian stepped forward, checking his tablet. Because of your visionary strategy, we've completely redefined the textile landscape. But more importantly, look at what you've done for the community. Because you gave us those flexible hours and premium wages, Maria was able to afford her daughter's asthma specialist. Arthur told me this morning that he finally paid off his mortgage. You didn't just build a profitable business, sir. You saved 42 families from destitution. Ethan looked past Julian's tablet and out the window. Down on the factory floor, the workers were singing. They had hung a massive, hand-painted banner across the steel rafters that read, "Thank you, Mr. Cross, our savior." Looking at their joyous, tear-filled faces, a strange, unfamiliar warmth bloomed in Ethan's chest. He had viewed these people as tools to bleed his company dry. He had hired the ex-cons, the single mothers, and the elderly entirely out of a selfish desire to game the system. But they didn't see a cynical loophole. They saw a man who looked at the forgotten, discarded members of society and said, "You have value." Is this what it feels like to do something right? Ethan thought, a complex emotion twisting in his throat. He felt a sudden, profound sense of guilt, followed immediately by a strange, quiet pride. He had failed to get rich, but for the first time in his life, the factory his grandfather built wasn't a burden. It was a beacon. Suddenly, before Ethan could say a word to his cheering staff, the world around him froze again. The champagne bubbles in Clara's freshly poured glass stopped mid-air. Marcus's roaring laugh went completely silent. The holographic screen materialized before Ethan's face, flashing in stark, plain text. First settlement phase, complete. Evaluation. Host attempted to maximize losses through extreme employee compensation, high-risk capital investments, radical inclusive hiring practices, and anti-consumer marketing. Result: absolute failure to lose money. Total corporate value growth, 386%. Ethan braced himself, expecting a penalty. All right, let's hear it. Am I getting punished? System update. The wealth transfer system recognizes the host's tactical ingenuity. To maintain competitive balance and push the host to greater heights, the parameters for Phase 2 have been recalibrated. Phase 2 fund refresh granted, $5 million. Phase 2 settlement period, 60 days. New system rule locked. Host cannot repeat identical spending methods. Salary increases, standard machine purchases, and avant-garde clothing lines are now capped at current levels to prevent intentional profit farming. Ethan's eyes widened. $5 million. The system wasn't quitting. It was raising the stakes. It was practically throwing a fortune at him and daredeviling him to try again. And it had capped his successful strategies, meaning he couldn't accidentally profit off the same tricks twice. A slow, familiar manic spark reignited deep in Ethan's eyes. No more salary loops. No more hype-beast clothing lines, Ethan whispered, a wicked, desperate grin stretching across his face as the world snapped back to life. Clara handed him a glass of champagne. A toast to the future, Mr. Cross. Ethan took the glass, his mind already spinning at 1,000,000 miles an hour. If he couldn't lose money inside the factory city lines, he would have to think bigger. He would have to go somewhere so economically depressed, so geographically isolated, and so legally complicated that financial survival was fundamentally impossible. To the future, Clara. Ethan smiled, taking a deep sip. By the way, look up real estate listings in the poorest, most remote coal mining ghost towns in the Appalachian Mountains. We're opening a secondary manufacturing branch. Let's see you loyal geniuses high productivity your way out of a town with 0 paved roads, Ethan thought, laughing internally. The game is still on. Chapter 7. The Appalachian Money Pit. Mr. Cross, I say this with the utmost professional respect and deep personal concern, Clara said, her knuckles turning white as she gripped the passenger door handle of Ethan's car. You have completely lost your mind. Ethan didn't reply. He just smiled, happily steering his sedan over a massive pothole that rattled the vehicle's suspension. They were driving down a narrow, winding mountain road in the deep heart of the Appalachian coal country. Outside, the landscape was beautiful but starkly bleak. They passed rusted-out pickup trucks, abandoned coal tipples swallowed by kudzu, and collapsed wooden barns. This was Oak Haven. Population, 412. A decade ago, The local coal mine had shut down, taking the town's entire economy with it. There were no paved highways within 20 miles. The local power grid was notoriously unstable, and according to the latest economic census, it was officially designated as one of the lowest income zip codes in the entire country. To any sane business owner, it was an industrial graveyard. To Ethan, it was a beautiful, shining paradise of absolute financial ruin. "Clara, look at that fresh mountain air," Ethan cheered, pointing toward a crumbling brick building near a silt-heavy river. "Look at the lack of local competition. Look at the total absence of a skilled textile workforce. It's perfect." "It's an economic black hole, Ethan," Clara gasped, pulling up a regional report on her tablet. "If we open a secondary manufacturing branch here, the shipping logistics alone will eat us alive. We will have to haul raw cotton up these treacherous mountain switchbacks, and then haul the finished fabric all the way back down to the shipping ports. The fuel and transport costs will be triple our standard rate." "Yes, triple the transport costs. Burn that diesel oil, baby," Ethan cheered internally. "Furthermore," Clara pressed on, desperate to inject logic into her beloved boss, "the old timber mill you want to buy has been abandoned since 1994. The roof is collapsing. The wiring is completely corroded. It will cost at least $2 million just to make the building structurally safe, let alone functional." $2 million just for the roof? Oh, the system is going to bleed so beautifully. Ethan pulled the car up to the town square, which consisted of a small grocery store, a boarded-up diner, and a gravel parking lot. Waiting for them by the steps of a tiny town hall was a man wearing a faded flannel shirt and a look of profound disbelief. "Mr. Cross?" the man asked, stepping forward and extending a calloused, rough hand. "I'm Mayor Thomas. When your office called about purchasing the old Miller timber site, well, truth be told, we thought it was a prank call from a morning radio show." "No prank, Mayor Thomas," Ethan said, giving the man a firm, enthusiastic handshake. "Cross Textiles wants to expand, and we believe Oakhaven is the ideal location for our new high-volume production hub." Mayor Thomas stared at Ethan as if searching for signs of a hidden camera. "Son, there hasn't been an industrial job in this valley for 15 years. Most of our young folks move away the second they turn 18. The people left here were mostly older folks, ex-miners with bad lungs, and families scraping by on odd jobs. We don't know anything about making high-fashion denim." Ethan's heart did a joyous little dance. No youth, no experience, and bad lungs. It's a trifecta of low productivity. "We don't care about experience, Mayor," Ethan declared, his voice ringing with a false sense of noble conviction. "We care about community. Cross Textiles will buy the Miller site today for full market value. No, scratch that. We'll pay double the asking price to ensure the town council has immediate municipal funds." Clara let out a soft whimpering sound next to him. "And we aren't just building a factory," Ethan continued, gesturing grandly to the empty mountainsides. "We will hire 100 local residents immediately. We will pay for their complete retraining, and we will match the $28 an hour wage we pay at our main facility." Mayor Thomas took a step back, his eyes watering. His voice trembled violently. $28 an hour, Mr. Cross? That's not just a wage out here. That's a life-changing miracle. That puts food on tables that have been empty for a long time. Ethan smiled warmly, keeping his internal cackling strictly under wraps. "Let the miracle begin, Mayor. A miracle that will cost me $5 million and make me a very wealthy man." Within 3 weeks, the Oakhaven expansion was a roaring vortex of expenditure. Ethan poured money into the town like water through a sieve. He hired local contractors, who charged a premium due to the remote location, to completely gut and rebuild the old timber mill. He purchased heavy-duty power generators to combat the town's frequent blackouts. He trucked in standard, non-luxury weaving equipment, ensuring it complied with the system's strict anti-profit farming rules for Phase 2. Every morning, Ethan would log into his banking app, watching the beautiful downward trajectory of the system's $5 million corporate fund. $4 million, 3 million, 2 million. It was a systematic, flawless demolition of capital. The shipping costs were monstrous. The newly hired ex-miners were slow, their large, heavy hands clumsy with the delicate threads of the looms. Production output during the first 2 weeks was an absolute joke. They were ruining dozens of spools of raw material a day. Ethan sat in his temporary office in Oakhaven, sipping a cheap coffee, utterly at peace. 40 days left until the settlement, Ethan whispered happily to himself. The shipping bottlenecks are permanent. The workers are struggling. The infrastructure is a nightmare. I've finally done it. I've found the unsavable project. Suddenly, his office door knocked. It wasn't Clara. It was Mayor Thomas, flanked by a woman in a sharp, professional navy blue blazer. Ethan's internal alarm bells faintly chimed. Mayor Thomas, who is your friend? Mr. Cross, this is Director Evelyn Vance from the State Economic Development and Environmental Revitalization Bureau, Mayor Thomas said, his face practically glowing with pride. Director Vance stepped forward, flashing a high-powered political smile as she shook Ethan's hand. Mr. Cross, I've been sent here directly by the governor's office. For the past 3 weeks, our state economic metrics have shown a massive, unprecedented spike in the Oakhaven area. When we investigated, we discovered a single private textile company single-handedly lowering the regional unemployment rate by 20%. Ethan felt a sudden cold bead of sweat roll down his spine. Well, we like to help out. It's more than help, Mr. Cross. It's a textbook example of rural revitalization, Director Vance said enthusiastically, pulling an official, gold-embossed document from her briefcase. Because you chose to invest in an economically distressed coal mining zone, and because you are employing a workforce comprised of displaced energy workers, your factory completely qualifies for the Federal Enterprise Zone Initiative and the Clean Rural Energy Subsidies. Ethan stopped breathing. The what? First, Director Vance announced, tapping the paper, the state is granting Cross Textiles an immediate total corporate income tax exemption for the next 7 years. Second, because you installed those high-capacity power generators to stabilize the local grid, the Department of Energy is classifying your facility as a regional backup utility hub. They are issuing a direct infrastructure grant to your company to completely pave the access roads and upgrade the valley's power grid for free. Ethan's coffee cup slipped from his fingers, splashing dark liquid all over his desk. And finally, Director Vance beamed, handed him the pen. To reward your corporate courage, the state is providing a 1-to-1 matching wage subsidy. For every $28 you pay a local worker, the state government will reimburse your company $14 to offset your training costs. Congratulations, Mr. Cross. You've just cut your primary labor and infrastructure overhead in half. The room spun. The walls of the old timber mill seemed to close in on him. Ding! The system notification flared to life, in sharp, merciless plain text, directly across Director Vance's smiling face. Corporate fund balance, $3,850,000, 12 cents. Current settlement wealth, $0. Warning, host's expansion strategy has triggered the government-subsidized revitalization hidden multiplier. Infrastructure costs reduced by 100%. Labor costs reduced by 50%. Net value of Oakhaven asset increased by $1.8 million. Projected personal wealth settlement, $0. Ethan stared at the pen in his hand. He looked out the window. A massive state construction crew was already rolling into town. Heavy machinery ready to pave the roads for free. The local workers were cheering, waving at the trucks. Ethan raised the pen, his hand shaking so violently he could barely form his signature. I went to a ghost town, Ethan thought, his mind screaming in absolute hysterical agony. I went to a place with no roads and no economy. Why is the federal government paying my bills? Chapter 8. The Eco-Friendly Backfire. 30 days left in Phase 2. Ethan locked himself in his newly renovated state-subsidized office in Oakhaven, refusing to look out the window. If he looked, he would see the beautifully paved, smooth asphalt highway that the government had built right to his doorstep. He would see the shiny new power substation that eliminated all his glorious, expensive electrical blackouts. "The system is a sadist," Ethan whispered, rocking back and forth in his leather chair. "The government is an accomplice, and my workers are a cult." The corporate fund was a terrifying $3.8 million. Because of the state's 50% wage subsidy, his massive payroll wasn't burning money fast enough. In fact, with the logistics bottlenecks completely solved by the new highway, the Oakhaven branch was already starting to produce standard denim batches at a terrifyingly efficient cost margin. "Think, Ethan, think," he scolded himself, hitting his temples. "What is an industry standard that costs an absolute fortune, slows down production, yields zero immediate profit, and is generally considered a massive corporate headache?" He stared at his laptop screen until his eyes watered. Then, he saw a news article about a major apparel brand getting fined for chemical dumping. His eyes widened. A slow, maniacal grin crept back onto his face. "Environmental compliance," Ethan breathed, the spark of desperate genius returning to his eyes. "Eco-friendly manufacturing." In the textile world, traditional chemical dyes and synthetic bleaching agents were incredibly cheap and fast. Shifting to 100% organic, eco-friendly materials was a notorious corporate nightmare. Organic cotton cost 3 times as much. Natural plant-based dyes like authentic indigo required a massive, delicate fermentation process that took weeks, compared to synthetic dyes that colored fabric in minutes. Furthermore, Ethan decided he wouldn't just buy organic materials. He would build a state-of-the-art, hyper-expensive, completely unnecessary closed-loop wastewater treatment facility right inside the factory. "I'll install a system that purifies the factory's runoff water so thoroughly that you can drink it," Ethan laughed, slapping his desk. "It'll cost a cool $2 million. It requires constant filter replacements. It serves absolutely zero business purpose because the local environmental laws in this rural county are incredibly lax anyway. I'm over-complying. It's pure, unadulterated financial waste." He stood up, practically throwing his office door open. "Clara, get the procurement team on the line. We are going green." A week later, the Oakhaven factory looked less like a textile mill and more like a high-tech agricultural laboratory. Ethan had spent $2.2 million of the system's funds overnight. Huge, gleaming stainless steel filtration tanks were erected at the back of the building. Massive shipments of expensive, certified organic raw cotton and thousands of pounds of rare, natural indigofera plant leaves arrived on flatbeds. Ethan gathered the workers on the floor to explain the new, slower, financially disastrous protocol. "Team," Ethan announced grandly, hiding his inner ecstasy, "we are completely abandoning cheap, efficient synthetic chemicals. From now on, we will only use natural indigo fermentation vats. This process takes a full 14 days to mature. Our production speed will drop by a crushing 70%. And this water filtration system will constantly pull power to purify our waste." The ex-miners and local workers looked at the massive, bubbling vats of blue plant sludge. Old Arthur, who had traveled from the main branch to help supervise, squinted at the filtration tanks. "Mr. Cross, this natural fermentation is incredibly finicky. If the temperature drops even 2 degrees, the bacteria die and the whole batch of dye is ruined. It's an incredibly risky, expensive way to color fabric." "I know, Arthur. Isn't it beautiful?" Ethan smiled warmly. "We must protect Mother Earth, no matter how bankrupt it makes us. If a batch ruins, we just throw it out and buy more. No pressure." Ethan went back to his office and monitored the metrics. It was working flawlessly. Because the natural dye took weeks to prepare, the loom machine sat completely idle for days. The workers were being paid their massive $28 an hour wages just to stand around and stir vats of smelly plant liquid with wooden oars. The corporate fund was bleeding out beautifully. $3.8 million, $2.5 million, $1.6 million. Ethan watched the numbers drop with tears of pure relief in his eyes. Finally, a strategy that can't be beaten by hard work. You can't make a plant ferment faster just by being grateful. With only 5 days left before the settlement, Ethan was confident. The production output for the month was a pathetic fraction of their usual numbers. They had spent millions on raw organic materials and expensive filters, and had virtually zero finished product to sell. He was going to win. He was finally going to get his multi-million-dollar personal payout. On the morning of the 29th day, Ethan walked into the factory, ready to coast through the final 24 hours. But the moment he entered the lobby, he noticed Clara wasn't at her desk. In fact, the lobby was packed with unfamiliar people holding professional cameras, microphones, and high-end recording equipment. A woman with a sleek microphone bearing the logo of a massive global news network spotted Ethan and ran toward him. "Mr. Cross! Mr. Cross! Sarah Jenkins from Global Green Business Report. Can we get a quote on your revolutionary Pure River initiative?" Ethan froze, his hand trembling on his coffee cup. My what?" Clara pushed her way through the crowd, her face radiating a level of fanatical worship that genuinely terrified Ethan. "Ethan, they're here for you. The documentary crew. It's a miracle." "Clara, speak English," Ethan hissed, pulling her into a corner. "Why is international media in a coal mining ghost town?" "Because of the river, Ethan," Clara cried, gripping his shoulders. 2 weeks ago, when you installed that $2 million wastewater filtration system, you ordered that the purified water be discharged directly into the local Silt River, right? Yes, to waste it. Well, that Silt River has been heavily polluted by old coal mine runoff for 30 years. It was completely dead. But your filtration system discharges water that is so clinically pure, so oxygen-rich, that it literally diluted the toxic acidity of the entire river basin downstream. Clara took a deep breath, her eyes sparkling. Local environmentalists noticed the river suddenly turning crystal clear. Yesterday morning, a rare endangered species of mountain trout, which hasn't been seen in this state since 1974, was discovered spawning right behind our factory discharge pipe. The Wildlife Federation went viral on social media. Ethan felt a violent, familiar throbbing in his temples. A trout? Not just a trout. The entire global fashion industry is talking about us. Clara shouted over the noise of the flashing cameras. The Pure River denim movement. High-end consumers are calling it the ultimate ethical luxury, a fabric that doesn't just reduce harm, but actively heals the environment. Vogue just published an article calling you the father of regenerative capitalism. Before Ethan could faint, Julian ran into the lobby, holding his tablet aloft like a shield. "Mr. Cross, it's out of control," Julian yelled excitedly. "Patagonia and Stella McCartney's corporate acquisition teams just saw the Vogue article. They don't even care that the fabric isn't woven yet. They just placed a joint, upfront pre-order retainer for our entire next year of natural indigo production. They wired a massive, non-refundable deposit directly into our corporate account to lock down the exclusive rights." Ethan stumbled backward, hitting the wall. With a slow, mechanical motion, he pulled his phone from his pocket. The plain text system notification flared to life, burning into his retinas like a supernova. Ding! Corporate fund balance, $6,430,004.12. Current settlement wealth, $0. Warning, host's eco-sabotage inadvertently unlocked the ultra-rare ecological restoration miracle achievement. Brand equity increased by 800%. Secured upfront global enterprise contracts. Net profit generated $4.8 million. Settlement in 24 hours. Projected personal wealth settlement, $0. Ethan stared at the camera lenses pointing at his face. He looked at the reporters waiting for a visionary speech from the father of regenerative capitalism. Deep inside his mind, Ethan was screaming so loud he thought his ears would bleed. "I just wanted to dump clean water to waste money." Ethan's soul wept. Why did the stupid fish have to come back? Chapter 9. The Recession-Proof Sanctuary. The final 24 hours of Phase 2 had passed. Ethan sat at a mahogany desk in his newly expanded corporate headquarters, staring blankly at the glass trophy that had arrived via courier that morning. It was from the International Sustainable Commerce Coalition, naming him Visionary Green CEO of the Year. The system's plain text summary floated in front of his face like a cruel, glowing joke. Settlement period, 60 days. Time remaining, 0000. Phase 2 final calculation complete. Net profit incurred, $5,930,004.12. Net loss incurred, $0. Personal wealth awarded, $0. Current personal wealth, $0. System fund refresh granted for Phase 3, $20 million. Phase 3 settlement period, 90 days. $20 million. The system was aggressively scaling up. It was no longer a game of small factory management. It was a game of serious corporate capital. If Ethan couldn't find a way to lose this money in 90 days, he would accidentally become a billionaire textile mogul, while personally remaining so broke he had to check his account balance before buying a fast food meal. "Ethan, you need to see this," Clara said, stepping into his office without knocking. Her face lacked its usual cheerful glow. Instead, she looked incredibly grave, holding a copy of the Financial Times. Ethan's heart gave a sudden, hopeful leap. "What is it? Did the fashion influencer get cancelled? Did Patagonia sue us?" "No," Clara said, dropping the newspaper onto his desk. The front page headline screamed in bold black ink. "Global recession looms. Manufacturing sector faces mass layoffs as consumer spending craters." Clara sighed, rubbing her temples. The housing market bubble burst. Interest rates are skyrocketing, and retail traffic has dropped by 40% in the last 2 weeks. Major clothing brands are canceling production orders across the country. Eiffelgard just called. They want to scale back our luxury denim delivery by half to cut costs. Ethan stared at the headline, and a slow, beautiful, almost holy warmth began to spread through his chest. A recession. A genuine, economy-wide, unstoppable market crash. "Oh, thank God," Ethan whispered, tears of pure relief welling in his eyes. He gripped Clara's hands across the desk. "Clara, this is terrible, simply devastating." "I know," Clara said softly, misinterpreting his tearful joy as profound empathy. "We have to prepare for the worst. Standard corporate protocol during a manufacturing recession is to immediately lay off at least 30% of our workforce, cut benefits, and freeze all operations in Oakhaven to preserve our cash reserves." Ethan's eyes snapped wide open. Lay off workers? Cut benefits? Shut down production? If he did that, the company would save money, weather the storm, and maintain its bloated corporate balance. "Absolutely not," Ethan roared, slamming his fist on the desk. He stood up, looking like a man possessed by noble defiance. "Cross Textiles does not abandon its people. Corporate protocol can go to hell." Clara blinked, stunned. "But Ethan, if we don't cut costs, our overhead will eat us alive. We have over 200 employees drawing premium wages between both branches. If consumer orders are dropping, we will be paying people millions of dollars to produce fabric that nobody is buying. We will bleed cash." "Yes, bleed. Bleed like an open artery," Ethan's mind screamed in pure, unadulterated ecstasy. "Clara, hear my decree," Ethan announced grandly, pointing a finger toward the ceiling. "Not only will we not fire a single employee during this recession, but we are also going to institute a strict no-layoff guarantee. We will lock in everyone's contracts for the next 3 years. Furthermore, because a recession causes immense psychological stress, we are introducing a fully funded mental health wellness program, free childcare at both facilities, and a monthly inflation adjustment bonus to help their families buy groceries." Clara gasped, covering her mouth. "Ethan, that will cost millions. If the market doesn't recover in 3 months, the sheer weight of our employee benefits will drag this company straight into an inescapable abyss of debt." "Then let us greet the abyss with a smile, Clara," Ethan declared heroically. "We stand by our family." Within 24 hours, the no-layoff guarantee and the recession bonus package were legally codified and announced to the entire workforce. Ethan sat in his office, listening to the system's corporate fund immediately begin to deplete. The $20 million fund was shrinking steadily as massive sums were locked away in employee protection trusts and childcare infrastructure. 30 days into Phase 3, the market grew even worse. The retail sector was paralyzed. Cross Textiles warehouses began to pile up with rolls of unsold, premium organic denim. They were spending millions to keep the machines running and the workers paid, but making virtually zero sales. The corporate fund dropped from $20 million down to $14 million, then down to $9 million. Ethan would walk through the factory floor, looking at the workers who were weaving fabric that would likely just sit in storage forever. They looked at Ethan with an intensity that verged on religious worship. They knew that their friends and neighbors at other factories were being laid off by the thousands, lines forming at the food banks, but at Cross Textiles, their lives were completely secure. "Keep weaving, my beautiful liabilities," Ethan whispered affectionately to a row of spinning looms. "Every yard of unsold fabric is a step closer to my villa in the south of France." By day 60, the corporate fund was hovering at a precarious $3.2 million. Ethan was ecstatic. The recession was deep, cold, and showing zero signs of recovery. For the first time since he awakened the system, a genuine mathematical financial collapse was staring him in the face. On day 75, Ethan decided to celebrate early. He poured himself a glass of cheap whiskey in his office, propped his feet up on the desk, and watched the corporate ledger slowly bleed out. Suddenly, his laptop chimed with a high-priority alert from the National Public Broadcasting Network. A live press conference was being held by the Prime Minister and the Secretary of Economic Affairs. Ethan lazily clicked the stream, expecting to hear more depressing economic updates. Instead, the Secretary of Economic Affairs stepped up to the podium, cleared his throat, and adjusted his glasses. "Good afternoon," the Secretary said into the microphones. "As our nation navigates this challenging economic downturn, the administration has been looking for a model of corporate resilience to anchor our new stimulus and relief package. We have observed that standard predatory corporate behaviors, mass layoffs, and austerity have only worsened consumer panic." The Secretary pressed a button, and a massive slide projected behind him. It was a picture of the Cross Textiles factory floor, with a giant bold subtitle, "The Cross Model of Socially Responsible Manufacturing." Ethan's whiskey glass froze halfway to his mouth. His eye began to twitch violently. "Therefore," the Secretary continued proudly, "the government is launching the National Economic Anchor Initiative. We are selecting 5 key hyper-stable corporations that demonstrated exemplary civic virtue by protecting their workers during the crisis. The state will be purchasing a massive, multi-billion-dollar strategic reserve of manufactured goods directly from these anchor companies to stimulate the supply chain." The Secretary smiled warmly at the camera. "Cross Textiles has been chosen as our primary manufacturing partner. The Department of Defense and the National Emergency Management Agency have just authorized a guaranteed, non-reducible federal procurement contract worth $60 million over the next 12 months to buy their entire surplus denim inventory for government uniforms and tactical gear." The whiskey glass dropped, shattering against the hardwood floor, splashing liquor and ice cubes across his shoes. Furthermore, the Secretary added, "To honor the incredible public support and viral goodwill generated by Cross Textiles' no-layoff sanctuary movement, the National Treasury is issuing a zero-interest, forgivable liquidity injection of $10 million to the company's corporate fund, effective immediately." Ethan sat frozen, his feet still propped up on the desk, staring at the screen as the stream cut to a clip of his own workers cheering outside the factory gates, holding up signs with his face on them. Ding! The system notification flared to life in plain text, glowing with a bright, mocking golden hue. Corporate fund balance, $13,200,004.12. Pending federal contract value, $60 million. Current settlement wealth, $0. Warning: host's anti-recession strategy has triggered the ultra-rare National Economic Savior milestone. Brand loyalty has reached absolute maximum. Secured lifetime government monopoly contract. Projected personal wealth settlement, $0. Ethan slowly lowered his feet from the desk, stepping right into the puddle of spilled whiskey and broken glass. He looked at the system screen, then down at his wet shoes. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just let out a soft, broken, hysterical chuckle that slowly grew into a full, echoing, manic laugh. A government monopoly, Ethan laughed, tears finally streaming down his face as he stared at the ceiling. I tried to bleed to death in a recession, and the President of the United States just made me a Department of Defense contractor. Why won't anyone let me lose? Hashart 10. The unsolvable real estate gamble. 5 days remained in Phase 3. Ethan sat in a pristine, state-of-the-art boardroom that felt entirely too corporate for his liking. The walls were lined with award plaques, framings of the Vogue and Financial Times covers, and a framed letter of commendation bearing an official government seal. The system's ledger was a horrifying sight. Corporate fund balance, $13,200,004.12. Pending federal contract value, $60 million. Current settlement wealth, $0. Projected personal wealth settlement, $0. $13 million in pure liquidity, with another $60 million practically banging down the door. If the settlement hit right now, Ethan wouldn't even be able to afford a premium subscription to a streaming service out of his own pocket. He was a corporate titan, trapped in the body of a man who still used a cracked screen on his phone because the repair fee felt too steep. Salary increases are capped. Machine upgrades are restricted. The government is buying our fabric to make tactical gear, Ethan whispered, his head resting heavily on the polished mahogany table. I have conquered manufacturing. I have conquered marketing. I have accidentally conquered the federal government. He needed an entirely new avenue of destruction, a sector so notoriously volatile, so prone to sudden collapses, and so utterly disconnected from the hard work of textile weavers that his employees couldn't possibly save him. Real estate, Ethan thought, his eyes snapping open. A manic grin spread across his face. Real estate was the ultimate graveyard for corporate cash. If you bought land that was fundamentally worthless, or if you invested in an expensive construction project that had zero market demand, the money simply vanished into the dirt. He couldn't buy luxury penthouses or prime city land. The system's reasonable business logic guardrails would see that as asset appreciation. He had to buy something that looked like a necessary corporate expense, but was practically a guaranteed financial black hole. Employee housing, Ethan breathed, slamming his hands on the table as he stood up. The Oak Haven branch is growing. The workers travel from all over the valley. I will buy a massive tract of land near the factory and build a sprawling, hyper-luxurious residential complex for them. Free housing. He pulled up a digital map of the Oak Haven region. Right next to his factory layout was a massive, barren, swampy valley known locally as the Sinks. It was an environmental disaster zone. The soil was heavy with sulfur from old, unmapped coal mines. The ground was highly unstable due to hidden sinkholes, and it sat directly in a notorious seasonal floodplain. The land had been on the market for 40 years, with a price tag of next to nothing, because building anything there required millions of dollars in deep foundation piling and soil remediation. I'll buy the entire swamp, Ethan cackled, his voice echoing in the empty boardroom. I'll pay 10 times the market rate to burn through my capital. Then I'll hire an elite architectural firm to design eco-friendly, high-density apartment complexes with underground parking, rooftop gardens, and heated pools for my workers. The unstable ground will cause massive construction delays. The foundation costs will eat up the remaining $13 million, and when the spring floods hit, the entire project will be a waterlogged tax write-off. It was a flawless, Multi-layered trap. 2 days later, the land transaction was finalized. Ethan successfully drained $5 million from the corporate fund just to acquire the swampy wasteland, overpaying the local county board so egregiously that the county treasurer reportedly wept with joy. He immediately contracted a high-end, expensive construction firm and ordered them to break ground on the Cross Sanctuary Employee Village. Mr. Cross, the lead engineer said, looking at the blueprints while standing knee-deep in the sulfur-scented mud of the sinks, "I must warn you, to build structural foundations here that won't sink into the old coal fissures, we have to drill down over 200 feet and pump in thousands of tons of high-density, pressurized concrete polymer. It is an astronomical expense. It serves no structural purpose for simple residential housing." "Do it," Ethan demanded heroically, slapping the engineer on the back. "Only the best for my workers. Pump that concrete. Drill to the center of the earth. Spare no expense." By the morning of the 29th day, with less than 24 hours until the final Phase 3 settlement, Ethan was practically vibrating with excitement. His banking app showed the corporate fund had been successfully depleted down to a beautiful, fragile $120,000. The rest of the $13 million was currently buried deep underground, converted into thousands of tons of incredibly expensive, specialized concrete pillars, stabilizing a worthless swamp. The construction was heavily delayed, the ground was a mess, and the local news was already calling it Cross's Folly. Ethan sat in his Oak Haven office, humming a song, waiting for the clock to run out. "Go ahead, settlement timer. Give me my millions." Suddenly, a massive, earth-shaking rumble vibrated through the floorboards of his office. It felt like a minor earthquake. Ethan gasped, his heart leaping into his throat. Did the swamp collapse? Did the pillars fail? Yes. He ran out of the building and sprinted toward the construction site, fully prepared to witness a glorious, chaotic sinkhole that had swallowed his entire investment. Instead, he found the entire construction crew, along with hundreds of factory workers, standing at the edge of the massive foundation pit. They weren't panicking. They were staring down into the hole with expressions of pure, unadulterated shock. In the center of the pit, one of the hyper-powerful deep earth drills had cracked open a massive, subterranean limestone cave wall. Emerging from the breach wasn't mud or sulfur water. It was a roaring, crystal-clear, steaming torrent of geothermally heated, mineral-rich water. "What is that?" Ethan stammered, stumbling to the edge of the pit. The lead engineer turned to Ethan, his eyes wide, his clipboard shaking. "Mr. Cross, your deep drilling mandate. You told us to drill past the coal layer, all the way into the deep bedrock precision zone. We didn't just hit a sinkhole. We just punctured the deep earth Appalachian thermal aquifer." Ethan felt the world tilt. "A hot spring?" "Not just a hot spring, sir," a man in a hard hat shouted, holding up a digital testing device. "The mineral composition is off the charts. High sulfur purified lithium and therapeutic magnesium. The water is naturally heating to exactly 104 degrees Fahrenheit. Before Ethan could even process the horror, a sleek black SUV pulled up to the gravel lot. Out stepped Director Evelyn Vance from the State Economic Bureau, accompanied by an older gentleman wearing a bespoke Italian suit. "Mr. Cross, I came as fast as I could," Director Vance cried out, gesturing to the man beside her. "This is Dr. Eris Thorne, the Chief Acquisition Officer for the Global Wellness and Luxury Hospitality Group." Dr. Thorne stepped forward, staring at the steaming, mineral-rich lake forming in the construction pit with a look of predatory financial ecstasy. "Incredible. Absolute perfection. Mr. Cross, the luxury wellness industry has been searching for an authentic, high-temperature mineral aquifer on the East Coast for 3 decades. The land surrounding this valley is now officially the most valuable therapeutic real estate in the country." Ethan grabbed his own hair, his voice pitching into a high, hysterical squeak. But it's a swamp, it floods." "It was a swamp," Dr. Thorne corrected with a sophisticated chuckle. "But because you ingeniously pumped thousands of tons of high-density concrete polymer into the surrounding fissures, You accidentally created a massive subterranean retaining wall that permanently stabilized the upper crust and redirected the floodplains away from the basin. You didn't just find a spring. You perfectly engineered a hyper-stable, eco-luxury resort foundation. Dr. Thorne pulled a pre-drafted contract from his breast pocket. My group wants to lease the northern half of your newly stabilized land to build a $500 million luxury spa and casino resort. We will pay Cross Textiles an immediate upfront land use authorization fee of $15 million, plus a 10% recurring annual equity stake in the resort's gross revenue. Ethan staggered backward, tripping over a piece of scrap rebar and falling flat on his back into the dirt. From his pocket, his phone vibrated with a long, slow, mournful buzz. The settlement hour had struck. The plain text notification materialized in the sky above him, glowing with a blinding, diamond-like brilliance. Ding. Phase 3 settlement period expired. Final calculation complete. Corporate fund balance, $15,120,004.12. Estimated asset value increase, Oakhaven Real Estate, $140 million. Net profit incurred, $15 million, upfront lease, plus massive asset appreciation. Personal wealth awarded, 0. Current personal wealth, 0. Congratulations, host. You have successfully completed the initial system trials. You have proven to possess a flawless, unsabotageable entrepreneurial character. You refused to enrich yourself, protected your workforce during a recession, healed the environment, and revitalized a dying region. The wealth transfer system will now initiate its final evolution phase, preparing to unlock corporate metrics, $300 billion value, 1.2 million jobs. Please look forward to Phase 4. Ethan lay flat on his back in the mud, staring up at the blue Appalachian sky, surrounded by hundreds of workers who were currently dropping to their knees, weeping and cheering his name as the undisputed king of the valley. He had tried to buy a useless swamp. He had tried to build a waterlogged disaster, and the universe had handed him a $500 million luxury hot spring empire. Ethan slowly covered his face with his hands, his body shaking as a soft, completely broken laugh escaped his lips. "I give up," Ethan whispered into his muddy palms. "I give up. I'm going to be a billionaire, and there's absolutely nothing I can do to stop it." It's what every major apparel company does to maximize profit margins. Ethan's eyes flared with sudden life. He sat up straight. They want us to outsource to cut costs. Yes, they say it's the only way to keep up with foreign competition. A brilliant, beautifully toxic idea bloomed in Ethan's mind. A smile, slow and predatory, stretched across his face. If major companies outsource to save money by exploiting cheap labor and low regulations, what would happen if Ethan did the exact opposite? What if he launched an international expansion into a region with the most notoriously complex labor laws, the highest corporate tax rates, the strictest environmental regulations, and the most powerful labor unions on the planet? "We aren't outsourcing to a developing nation, Clara," Ethan declared, slamming his hand on the table. "That's predictable. That's greedy. Cross Enterprises is a company with a soul." Clara looked at him, her pen poised over her notepad. "Okay, where are we going then?" "Western Europe," Ethan beamed. "Specifically, France and Germany. We are going to buy out old, historic, failing European luxury mills that are on the verge of bankruptcy due to aggressive union strikes and astronomical local energy costs. We will absorb their entire workforce." Clara's jaw dropped slightly. "Ethan, the manufacturing unions in France are legendary. If you violate a single workplace protocol, they will shut down the entire grid. And the energy crisis in Europe means running heavy industrial looms there costs 4 times what it does here. It's a financial suicide mission for a mass-production textile company." "Yes, a financial suicide mission. Keep talking, Clara. I'm almost there." "We aren't going there to mass-produce, Clara," Ethan countered smoothly, adapting his logic on the fly. "We are going there to preserve heritage. We will buy the failing mills, keep every single worker on the payroll, and explicitly state in their new contracts that they are guaranteed a 6-hour workday, 6 weeks of paid annual vacation, and fully subsidized corporate pensions. He leaned back, intertwining his fingers. And to ensure we spend as much of this $200 million as possible, we will mandate that all raw materials must be transported via experimental, zero-emission, hydrogen-powered cargo ships, which cost a massive premium to charter because the technology is barely out of the prototype phase. Ethan wanted to laugh out loud. A 6-hour workweek in a hyper-taxed European jurisdiction, combined with unproven, ridiculously expensive hydrogen shipping logistics. No amount of worker gratitude could overcome the sheer structural weight of European bureaucracy and experimental fuel costs. The money would evaporate before the fabric even cleared customs. "Authorize the acquisition funds immediately, Clara," Ethan ordered, trying to contain his manic glee. $150 million for the European heritage buyout. Let's go global. 2 months later, Ethan stood in the historic textile district of Lyon, France. The air was cool, and the cobblestone streets were lined with centuries-old brick factories. He had successfully purchased 3 failing luxury silk and wool mills in France, and 2 historic weaving facilities in Bavaria, Germany. The transaction had drained a massive $160 million from the system's corporate fund. Ethan had spent the last few weeks signing union agreements that made the local labor leaders look at him as if he were a literal saint, descended from the heavens. He gave them everything they wanted and more. Shorter hours, massive pension guarantees, and absolute job security. Currently, he was standing at the Lyon port, watching the arrival of the H2 Atlas, the experimental hydrogen-powered cargo ship he had chartered at an astronomical monthly rate to haul organic American denim thread across the Atlantic. The ship pulled into the dock with a soft, clean hiss of steam. "Look at it, Julian," Ethan said to his head of logistics, who had flown in to oversee the European operation. "No cheap diesel fuel, just pure, expensive, prototype hydrogen power. It costs us 20 times the standard shipping rate per container." Julian was staring at his tablet, his brow furrowed. "Mr. Cross, it's true that the charter fee for the H2 Atlas is bleeding our cash reserves. But something unexpected just happened when the ship docked." Ethan's smile faltered. His left eye gave a tiny, involuntary twitch. "What do you mean, unexpected? Did the hydrogen tank leak? Is the cargo ruined? Please tell me the fabric is ruined." "No, sir. The fabric is pristine," Julian said, turning the tablet toward Ethan. "But because we are the very first multinational corporation to successfully utilize a commercial-scale, zero-emission hydrogen vessel for transatlantic trade, the European Commission in Brussels just noticed us." Ethan felt a cold, phantom hand wrap around his throat. The European Commission?" "Yes, sir. Under the new European Green Deal and the Zero-Emission Maritime Mandate, the EU has been looking for a corporate pioneer to prove that green shipping is viable for heavy industry. Because Cross Enterprises stepped up and funded the prototype ship, the EU Customs Union just issued an emergency decree." Julian tapped the screen, bringing up an official document stamped with the blue and gold stars of the European Union. "They are granting Cross Enterprises an absolute permanent exemption from the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism tax," Julian whispered in awe. "And because we preserve the failing historic mills in France and Germany, the French Ministry of Economy and the German federal government have jointly approved a massive multi-million euro cultural heritage subsidy. They are covering 80% of our local industrial energy bills for the next 5 years to reward us for saving their domestic textile legacy." Ethan's phone vibrated in his pocket. It didn't buzz once. It vibrated in a long, continuous, agonizing drone. With a hand that felt completely numb, Ethan pulled the phone out. The plain text system message updated right before his eyes. Ding! Corporate fund balance, $184,200,000, $4.12. Current settlement wealth, $0. Warning: Host's international expansion has triggered the transatlantic green pioneer and European cultural savior hidden milestones. Energy overhead reduced by 80%. Import tariffs reduced to 0%. Received a €50 million direct state grant. Net corporate value increased by $600 million. Projected personal wealth settlement, $0. Ethan stood on the Lyon docks, the cool European wind blowing through his hair. Around him, the French factory workers were opening bottles of wine, cheering his name in accents he could barely understand, calling him the champion of the working class. He looked at the prototype green ship. He looked at the historic brick factories. "I bought a factory in a country famous for strikes," Ethan whispered to the river, a single broken tear escaping his eye. "I used a ship that runs on water and hopes. Why? Why does the government always pay me back?"